What's going on, everyone? This is Sportin Cannabis and CBD, and I'm your host, William Smith.
Today I have the very special privilege of interviewing Antonio Harvey. So Antonio, thank you for joining us.
No, thank you for having me, man. We appreciate it. I appreciate it for sure.
Absolutely. So, a lot of stuff to get into, just trying to get started. Would you just be able to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, man, where do I start? Antonio Harvey, 12-year NBA veteran, 12-year NBA broadcaster, total of 25 years in the NBA, which, when I think back, still amazes me to an extent because, I'm a small town kid from Mississippi who, didn't think he had a shot, but worked hard, and I was able to make it and converted over into the cannabis space. I believe in what cannabis does for the human body and look forward to the next opportunities to come up.
Absolutely. That's awesome. So growing up, at least for me, I had a bunch of different sports influence be a big part of my life. Was basketball your first love, or was there something kind of before that?
No, actually, I wasn't much of a basketball player growing up. In fact, I wasn't much of an athlete, if I'm being completely honest. Growing up, I didn't really come into my own as a basketball player until my senior year in high school. I grew up in a football family. Yeah, my dad played in the NFL. My older brother played in the NFL. And so football was my first love. And I always fancied myself a tight end / wide receiver. And then must have been between the 9th and 10th grade, I had a 6-inch growth spurt over about 3 months. So
That'll do it.
Yeah, right. So I had to get off the football field. I was way too tall to do that. Started playing basketball at a more competitive level. But what I tell people is, when you have that big of a growth spurt, it takes years for your body and mind to get back on the same page, right? And so I think that's kind of what I dealt with was, early in my high school days, I was still relearning my body. You can be a good athlete until you grow 6 inches. And then all of a sudden you look kind of goofy out there again. And I went through that. And then my senior year, I finally started to come into my own. But I also say, I don't know that I really understood my body until I was 22 again. Like it took a solid 4 or 5 years for me to relearn my coordination. And so now I'm a grown man trying to make it in the NBA. And so that's kind of the early stories. But no, football was definitely where I wanted to go. But basketball is where I ended up.
Wow, that's amazing. So kind of, having such a big background in the NFL, with your brother and your dad and, kind of getting into basketball, I'm sure, like you said, relearning your body, you don't know it as well when you're growing 6 inches. And so how did, out of high school, how did all that go with, getting recruited and stuff like that? And then kind of making that decision, I want to play college and kind of just going from there.
Well, it was a mentality. It was almost like a family mentality, for lack of a better way of putting it, So growing up where I did, when I did, and the way I did, it was the only way that I was going to go to college, right? We knew that from an early age that athletics got us to college. It was what sport you were going to play. So once I started playing basketball, I went hard at it. I loved it, but it was still a transition and all the stuff we talked about, learning a new body, all of that kind of stuff. I was off the radar up until my senior year. I went to some camps the summer before my senior year. And like I said, I was just starting to come back into my body at that point. And I had a really great summer, like a tremendous summer, from off the radar to a top 5 center in the country, all in 30 days, it seemed like. And then I was on the radar and the recruiting started. I ended up going to Southern Illinois University. Probably had bigger and better opportunities out of high school. But the only coach, and I love telling this story, the only coach that recruited me at a young age was a guy named Robert McCullum, and he's now the head coach at Florida A&M. Well, Coach Mack met me when I was a 9th grader. My older brother was in basketball camp. He played football, but he claimed that he was a basketball player, but we know how that goes. He was at a basketball camp at South Alabama. Coach McCullum was an assistant coach there. He saw this, and even as a 9th grader, I was tall. I was 6'4". So it's not like I was a short 9th grader. I just hadn't reached, a next level of height. At any rate, Coach McCullum gave me one of the camp balls, and that's kind of where I got started along my basketball path. He continued to recruit me throughout high school. He was the only basketball coach that recruited me up until that point where things turned and more people came on board. But I had already made a commitment to him. And no matter where he was, because he was first up, right? When nobody else knew who I was, he did. He was willing to take that time. So I felt a level of obligation, and it was the right move. I ended up at SIU, had a great freshman year. And then when he left after my freshman year, I felt like it was okay for me to leave as well. That's what I ended up doing.
Absolutely. So you went on to, I believe it was Connors College, right?
Well, I went to a junior college, yes, in Oklahoma, Connors State University, but I didn't play. That was that's a long, convoluted story, but it was the way to get me to the University of Georgia.
Absolutely. That's awesome. So, you kind of bounced around, but felt like you owed it to the person that kind of noticed you first.
Yes.
I feel like being an athlete kind of in my younger years, that means a lot when someone believes in you and kind of sees, the potential that you have. So if you were describing your game to someone, how would you describe your style of play?
Everything that no one wanted to do. I think back as a guy who wasn't drafted, right? You have to find sneaky ways to get attention from a GM or a coach. And so I look back to my first year in LA with the Lakers. I'm on a make good contract. I'm trying to find my way into the NBA. And my attitude was, and it's still my attitude, is to go harder than the next guy, right? You look around and we're running sprints, for instance, and everybody's quitting, everybody's tired, everybody's on the sidelines complaining. Well, I want to be the last guy. I want to be the last guy running. I want to be the last guy putting in the time, putting in the effort, coming in early, staying in later. That was my commitment to making it in the NBA, was no matter what, I was going to be the last guy. And even now, I kind of carry that attitude into business. When other people are going to quit, I'm not. I'm just going to keep going. And eventually, good things will happen because I'm going to outwork or outthink or outplay or whatever it is. I'm going to be the last guy. And that's literally my attitude when it comes to just about anything in life.
That's an awesome mindset.
Sports and cannabis have been together literally since sports and cannabis could be together. You look at the NBA, you look at professional sports in general, and guys have been utilizing cannabis like since the 60s, athletes especially. The trick is always figuring out the whys, right? And so everybody in the 60s and 70s and 80s, there were drug problems in the league. Cannabis was thrown in with it. However, if you look at what we know today, cannabis was the one piece to the puzzle that should have stayed, right? Because there's so many medicinal opportunities within the plant. So my story is, towards the end of my career, I started to utilize it. Growing up in Mississippi, it was taboo. Everybody was afraid. I was afraid. My family was afraid. So we stayed away from it. I dabbled a little bit in college like any 19, 20-year-old kid would. But then as I dedicated myself to playing in the NBA, I had to get away from it because, I couldn't ingest in my lungs and
definitely
feel like I'm dedicated to being the best athlete I can be. Like, to me, they were contradictory to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I stayed away from cannabis for years. And then towards the end of my career, my older brother, who played in the NFL, he had long been using cannabis to stabilize pain, to deal with the mental anxieties that come from being a football player. So he got me on the oils. So he started making canna butters and, the kind of the behind the scenes stuff. It wasn't legal at the time. So I wasn't smoking, but I was ingesting, using different oils and things of that nature to help me sleep. Because you're an athlete. I'm sure you watch the NBA and the way that schedule goes, man. It's Denver on Monday, New York on Tuesday, Miami on Thursday. So you're getting in the cities at 3, 4 in the morning. You're trying to get some sleep, but your body's still wired up. You can't go to sleep right away. Cannabis allowed me to go to sleep, which ended up helping my recovery. So that was the start of the journey. Then when I left the NBA and got into broadcasting, nothing changes about my schedule. I don't have to play in a game, but I'm still at the same schedule. And, when you start looking at the mentality of an athlete, even though I'm not out there playing, as I'm watching it, I'm still engaged. And so mentally, I'm just as fatigued as if I played a game. So I continued the cannabis use into my broadcasting days to help me sleep. And so that was the journey of usage. I never was a smoker. I'll be the first to admit it. I couldn't put, and even now it's hard for me to ingest from a smokable standpoint because it's just not, it's habit. So then towards the end of my broadcast career, actually the end of my broadcast career, was the decision to get into the legal cannabis market here in Oregon. My wife and I made a decision. It was based somewhat around a business opportunity. It was based somewhat around what I believed cannabis to be. But I think mostly it was based around my desire to take my family back. You know, I have 4 kids. The oldest is 24 and the youngest is 9. I missed so much of my older kids growing up that I wanted to, if I could take the opportunity to be a part of my family's life again, I wanted to do that. And so that's what I did. We went strong into the cannabis market with the understanding that it was likely to be the end of my broadcast career. And well, it turns out it was, but we were okay with that because I knew that there was going to be an opportunity on the other side.
Broadcasting the game, you're still, using the mental aspect. I think back to a guy like Tony Romo. When I watch football, he played the game for so many years and he's such a good commentator, but he's still using so much of his mental and all that type of stuff to really be engaged in the game and bring his professional and personal opinion into the game. Is seeing how you kind of got into things later in your career. How has it helped you personally, I guess, overall?
I think it's the idea of living a less painful life, right? When you do, you think about it, I played from age 13, 14 until I was 34. So that's 20 years. And then even in retirement, you still play pickup games. And now
Absolutely.
I'm almost, I just turned 50, and now is the time that you pay for all of that. I'm at the age now where the sacrifices I made, the diving on the floors, the playing through injuries, all of that stuff starts to become a thing at 50. And that's kind of the reality of the life we led. So for me, it's about living with a less painful life. It's about recapturing some of the vitality from a physical standpoint, right? Like, we now know that the science exists, that cannabis does help ease pain. It helps ease inflammation, which helps ease pain. And so
Absolutely.
That's kind of where I utilize it the most now. I use less, and I was never a big THC user anyway, but now I'm heavy into the CBD space. I utilize low doses of THC, like microdose THC, high dose CBD. And that's kind of where the idea behind our products came in, was I'm utilizing it anyway. 1.5, 2 milligrams of THC. So I'm never feeling high. And then I've got 25 milligrams of CBD in a product. So I'm getting that relief. And then you add the CBNs and the CBGs and all of these other Delta 8s and all of these other cannabinoids, you start to feel the impact. And it's an interesting thing that a lot of people aren't aware of, but the average person lives their adult life in a form of chronic pain, right? And you think about that, and then you start to do, there have been tests and studies that show it to prove it. But then you start to look at the impact of chronic pain on the human body, right? The histamines that are created from pain. They believe that the average human could add 7 years to their lifespan if they can figure out how to decrease their pain, daily pain, chronic pain. And so
I did not know that. That's an amazing little fact right there.
Right. So that's my, by the way, man, and I hate to say it this way, but it's just the truth. That's kind of my thing, is the research, right? I can't grow because I have a brown thumb, but I love research. And so that's the kind of thing I believe in the plant, but then I had to go find the science. And that's not even a cannabis fact. That's just a fact of life. The average person can add 7 years to their life expectancy by decreasing pain. So when you put all of that together, it was a no-brainer, right? Like I'm utilizing cannabis to feel better. I know that there's athletes out there, not even pros. How about the guy that played rugby all his life because he loves rugby? Or
That's a great point.
or the girl who does roller derby, or the gym rat who just goes to the gym every single day where they're still putting stress on their bodies, undue, unnecessary, unnatural stresses. They're going to pay for that one day, probably around 50. They're going to start to feel that pain. And I don't want to jump into the product. I'll let you lead the conversation. But that was the idea and the genesis of what Legends is. It's a way for us to decrease your pain and hopefully increase your life expectancy. Now, I can't make any promises on that, but we know that decreasing pain increases life expectancy. We also have anecdotal evidence that says that utilizing cannabis decreases pain. So I feel like that's a relatively short line to follow. So yeah, I'm passionate. I'm ultra passionate about what we're doing because I know that we're helping people. Once you get past all of the cannabis stuff and all of that, when you break it down at its essence, we're helping people feel better and live better lives.
You did a great job of it, kind of touching on my last question, talking about the skepticism behind it. It was sort of a taboo thing growing up and everyone kind of stayed away from it. How would you say, now through your years of experience, what is your personal routine like on just a daily basis, any kind of normal day?
For me, it's about regulation, homeostasis. We can get into the science behind my thought process, but it really boils down to this. I wake up in the morning. I use our products in the morning. I wake up and it's a low dose of THC and about 25 milligrams of CBD. So that's first thing in the morning. Then around lunchtime, I have a second dose. So for me, it's not about a big dose at once. And the science is starting to show, kind of like with your sugar intake. If you jump up in the morning and you eat 3 teaspoons of sugar, right? You're going to get a quick spike, but then that sugar is going to leave your system and you're going to crash. Well, we need to start looking at cannabis and CBD, or whichever way you want to go, THC, CBD, whichever way you want to go. We need to start looking at it the same way. If you dose CBD or THC one big time in the morning, well, over the course of the day, your body's gonna move through that, right? And it's not gonna be as effective. So for me, wake up in the morning, microdose THC, large doses of CBD. Same thing in the afternoon, probably around 1-ish, and then again right around dinner time, usually right before dinner, about an hour before dinner, because I want it to be in the system, processing through the system before I eat dinner and slow my body down, to slow my metabolism down. And then before I go to bed, it's another microdose of THC and a 25 milligram CBD. So that's our regimen. And that's what we're preaching to the world is it's not a once a day thing. It's an all day microdosing. So you're feeding your endocannabinoid system the entire day. And then you get into a routine of that. That's when you start to feel better. I try to explain to people when they ask me about it, you're not going to feel the impacts of cannabis until you stop. Right?
That's a great point.
Right? The minute you stop taking it, it's like, why's my back is bothering me this morning? Well, it's because that the endocannabinoid system is kind of shut down because you stopped feeding it because you got off of the cannabis. So that's kind of always my thing is you can take it and you'll be like, man, I don't feel any different. Yes, you do. You just don't know it because it's such a subtle impact. But then I tell people, I give them a 14-day challenge. Do 14 days on our products, stop for 7, right? And tell me how you feel. And tell me how you felt at day 14, and then tell me how you felt at day 21 after 7 days not on the cannabis. And to a man, it's always the same thing. Much worse when I stopped. And that's that's my thing. And the other piece, man, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention this. So we actually interviewed about 1,200 people, right? And not pro athletes. It was a Facebook thing. You send it out to people that fit within a certain dynamic. And what we found was, and they were all people who fancied themselves athletes at some level. what we found was about 66%, about 800 of those people utilize cannabis every day, pre-workout and or post-workout. So I'm thinking to myself, all this time I thought that cannabis was a secret to professionals. Come to find out, the professionals are the ones that don't know about it. It's everybody else in the world is aware of the impact of cannabis on a workout. We just had to find out. We needed the science to tell us, but everybody else already knew. So it's been interesting. That was probably one of the most enlightening conversations or pieces of science that we did, was finding out that so many people utilize cannabis anyway.
Tell us a little bit about your brand. Give everyone the full background.
So we started Legends about 18 months ago. Legends was born about 7 years ago. The idea of microdosing, because like I said, I wasn't utilizing cannabis, the way other people do. I wasn't smoking joints. I was, microdosing oils and things of that nature. So about 18 months ago, we were just thinking about ways to grow in the industry is what it was. My wife and I, we have a cultivation facility already. So we were trying to move into the next phase. What's next for cannabis? And I believe certainly that edibles and non-smokables are the future of cannabis. And so we had to figure out how we could get in. Then we had to figure out, how do we utilize the things we know? And there's two things that I feel very comfortable talking about. One is sports. The other one is cannabis. Because when we got in, I went all in on the science. Like, what do I need to know? I need to know everything. What can I learn? And where can I go? And where can I get more information? And so that was the genesis of Legends, the idea of intersecting athletes and cannabis. We knew once we did the survey, we knew that athletes utilize cannabis, non-professionals especially. We knew they were utilizing it. So how do we impact that market? Number one. Number two, how do we normalize the overall and general conversation about cannabis? And if you look at the most influential people in the world, it's athletes and entertainers. Even though we don't necessarily deserve to be that influential, it is what it is. So what we wanted to do was create a product that was aspirational, so that when people see this group of professional athletes utilizing cannabis in a non-stoner way, they feel more accepting of the plant and of cannabis overall. Then we can utilize that group to influence the next group of athletes down, which is like I said, the polo guy, the rugby guy, the guy who has played sports his whole life and loves sports, but is feeling the impact and the pain from having done so. And then we can start to impact society overall. So it's not just the business standpoint. So Legends was born out of the idea of, we can help people feel better. We can hopefully expand life expectancy. And as a side effect, we can normalize the conversation around cannabis overall, which to me was a big piece of it. It needs to be a big piece of the conversation is, can we normalize cannabis and make it so that there isn't the stigma that I had to deal with when I was growing up?
So if you had to take one player from the current generation and one player from when you played, who would be your two favorite players and why?
Oh, man. Well, first of all, my all-time favorite player in the history of the game is Michael Jordan. I had his posters on my wall. He came in 84. I graduated from high school in 88. So, and then I graduated college in 93. So MJ's run in the NBA was was the time that I became a basketball player. So definitely Michael Jordan, because he embodied winning. And people hated him or loved him. And even now people hate him or love him, but you can't deny the fact that dude was a force, right? He was a winner, and he could will his teams to win. In fact, I've shared the story before, and I don't know if you've ever heard it, but when I was with the Grizzlies, the expansion year, we were playing Chicago in Vancouver, and we were up by, I think, 18. We were up big on the Chicago Bulls. Now, this is the defending national champs. We're NBA champs. This is the Chicago Bulls. Mike comes out. He goes out of the game. We're winning. My point guard starts talking trash to MJ. He puts his shoes back on, checks back into the game, and I think he had 18 in the last 6 minutes of the game.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
You can Google the story. It's out there. We've talked about it enough now that it actually became a story.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's him though. Like he just decided, you know what? Since you want to talk, since you want to wake up the beast, let's wake up the beast. And he came out and single-handedly won the game. I don't remember, and obviously, it's a long time ago, but I don't think I remember anybody else on that team scoring during that run. Like he literally did it all. He got steals and rebounds and scoring and all of that. So that's MJ. He's hands down my number one guy. Modern guys, it's hard not to be a LeBron fan. It really bothers me that there's a conversation about who's the greatest player ever, MJ or LeBron, when the truth is it's such a subjective conversation. Yeah. So
exactly.
Why not, let's just say it's both. Like to me, and that's just my opinion. Because you can't go wrong either way. If you say MJ, you're right. Right? If you say LeBron, you're right. You can't lose. So why not end the conversation with, man, they're the greatest of their generations, and because they couldn't face each other, let's just let the conversation lie.
Just let it be. Exactly.
I'll tell you, the only thing that really bothers me about that conversation, if I'm being completely honest, is that Kobe's not mentioned. I think that bothers me.
I agree completely.
Kobe was a contemporary, right? He came in 2 or 3 years after me. So I got a chance to watch him evolve as a player and as a person. And, it's obviously it's easy to romanticize a person after they're gone. However, this isn't romance. Like these are cold, hard, stinking facts. Number one, I think Kobe sold me and it was a wrap for me where Kobe Bryant is concerned in terms of his entrance into the GOAT conversation. When he tore his Achilles and limped back onto the court, made 2 free throws to help seal the game, then limped back off the court. I'm sorry. That's GOAT stuff right there. Like that is
one of the more courageous things I've ever seen.
Right? I mean, let's talk about the mental fortitude. So let's say MJ is the greatest of all time because of his competitive nature, even though Kobe was right there in terms of competitive nature. There's no denying that, right? Let's say that LeBron, from a physical standpoint, is the greatest physical athlete of all times. Hard to argue, at least from the NBA standpoint. Hard to argue those 2 points. But from a mental fortitude perspective, has there ever been anyone better than Kobe?
Yeah, not really.
I can't come up with that guy. So, yeah. And that's why I hate that he's never mentioned. He's earned the right to be mentioned in the GOAT conversation, not to mention Kareem and Wilt and Oscar Robinson and all the guys that came prior to my understanding of the NBA. But I'm just talking about the 3 guys that I got to watch. I get to watch. It's ridiculous that Kobe's not in the conversation. To me, it's a 1A, and 1B conversation. I don't care who you decide. You can decide any one of them 3, and I'm going to agree with you. You're right. If you choose now, if you come off your ass and say Steph Curry, come on now, stop playing.
No, yeah, he's great, but put him in that conversation, not just yet.
Kevin Durant. I mean, I love KD. I think he's going to end up being an unbelievable player. But up here, I don't think he's on that level with the other guys, right?
Yeah.
And so
I couldn't have said it any better myself. His talent speaks volumes for sure. But.
Yes, most talented. Now ask me the most talented player of all time. You got to mention Kevin Durant.
Absolutely.
But when we're talking about greatest of all times, it's hard for me to put him in that conversation. So, that's one of those we can go on and on and on. I apologize, but man, I just, and again, consider this. Kobe put me out of the playoffs twice. And I hated him as a competitor. but I respected him nonetheless. Then as I transitioned out of the competition side and into the broadcasting and admire and just watching and listening, now I can listen to Kobe's words and I can watch his actions, and I'm like, no, this dude is nothing at all like what I thought he was. He is not only a superb player, but his mentality about how he goes about the game is different than anybody else's that I've ever seen. He just, oh man, I hate that and it's not, again, this is not romanticizing Kobe Bryant. This is fact. Like, just look at, you know what I mean? I'm sorry, and I apologize. I know I'm probably preaching to the choir, but it's like, I hate that people don't give him the respect he deserves.
Exactly. You know, I think about it, and, you know, the greats couldn't have been the greats without, you know, one coming before the next. And I think it's all about paying that respect.
Right.
And, you know, like you said, not comparing everyone and just enjoying their greatness and taking it for what it is. So, you know, I listen, I don't mind at all. I had to get your opinion before I let you go and everything like that. Your journey has also been amazing, both the playing aspect and the broadcasting. I can't thank you enough for coming on the pod today and, you know, taking the time to talk to me.
Nah, man, thank you for taking the time to have me. You know, it's funny. I left broadcasting and I left it behind. But here lately, I found myself in situations where I'm having to communicate again about sports or about cannabis or whatever subject matter that I'm being called upon. And it's cool because I can feel that broadcast energy come back out. It's like I did this for 12 years and I played for another 12. So I was around the game for almost 20 and I coached for a year. So 25 years, the energy comes back and I enjoy it. So
Sportin Cannabis, you know, two really easy and great things to talk about.
Yes.
So, you know, thank you again, and we'll be in touch soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, man. Great talking to you.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
Thanks, Will.